Okay, class. So I welcome you to this playlist for your Edexcel IGCSE's biology. And we would begin from the very start, and then ultimately we would go toward the end of your syllabus content. And you know that the first, you could say, the topic that we have to be cracking is this in your course is goes with the name of the nature and the variety of the living organisms. And for the nature and the variety of the living organisms, we would be looking on toward the first index of your syllabi, and this is 1.1 where we have to be discussing about the characteristics of the living organisms. Now you see as that since we are studying your subject biology, so we must be very much clear about it what this biology actually is. So this is the study of the living organisms. Like this is not only the living organisms that we have to bother about because we see that we have our external environment, and in the external environment we not only have the living organisms, we also have got some non-living things as well, like the air we have got and the water we have got and the soil nutrients we have got. So not only we would be talking about the living organism, but we would also see their interaction with the non-living or the abiotic component that we have in the environment. So for any of the thing that we call this as a living, so there has to be a basic criteria, or there has to be the presence of some basic characteristics in them, and if those basic characteristics they would be available within the living within an organism, so we would call this as living, or else we would say this is not living with us. So let us begin from the very basic thing, or the characteristics which the living organisms they need to have, and this is what we call this as a nutrition. And nutrition simply means that either you people have to be obtaining the food, and if we look on toward the plant, so they make their own food. So the nutrition aspect would all be whether you are consuming the food or whether you are making your own food. And then here comes the second characteristics that we have got in the living organism, and that would be the respiration. And this is simply a kind of a chemical reaction, and in that chemical reaction, what we people actually see is that there would be the food that you people eat, and the air has oxygen gas. So this oxygen gas that we have in the air and the food that you people are eating, so they both would be reacting with one another, and that is why we people are releasing the energy out of it, and that energy would be utilized for the survival for all the activities that the living organism have to do. Like, like if I provide you with sufficient of the food, and if I take all the oxygen out, so you people would not be able to survive. And if I provide you with the surplus of the air, and I don't provide you people with the food, then ultimately you people would not live, because these two things, the food and the air, they are mandatory for the releasing of the energy. Now, there comes another thing among the basic characteristics of the living organism, and this is what we refer to this as the sensitivity. Like, when we are there in our external environment, so in the external environment, the changes intend to happen. Like, you were there in a car, you were driving it, or you were sitting at the back seat, and some fast moving car came right in front of you. So what you people are gonna be doing is that you are people are gonna be detecting it, and then you are gonna react to it. You're gonna respond to it. So whatsoever the change that we people come across in our environment, so this would be referred to as a stimulus. So it can't only be a car moving right in front of you. This could be the playground where you would be playing and some fellow of yours would be throwing a ball onto you. So you people would detect it, and then you would respond it by protecting your eyes with the help of your hands. So this ability of the living organism, where they would be detecting a change in the environment and where they are going to be responding to that change. So this is what we call this as the sensitivity or the adaptability. And again, among the other features that we are discussing at the moment, to be calling something as a living, so we can never forget about the growth. Okay, like what growth is, like if we talk about the origin of the human beings, so they would have the sperm coming from the male father and egg from the female parent, and then they both would be fusing, they would be making the zygote out of it, and the zygote would be undergoing multiple mitotic divisions. We would see what mitotic divisions are, and here we are making the embryo out of it. And this embryo would be converted into the fetus would be born, and then ultimately it would become a child and the men and the old men. So there is no going back. Like the fetus cannot revert back to the embryo. The embryo cannot revert back to the zygote, and alternatively, we cannot even go back to from where we actually originated. So this here we see that there is a permanent increase in the size of an organism. Why I am saying permanent? Because we can't revert back what we were initially and now what we have become at the moment. So there is no going back. And what we see another thing is that this permanent increase in the size of the organism that we people are referring to this as growth. So here the number of the cells would be increasing and their size would be increasing. Now simply this permanent increase in the size of an organism is something we refer to this as the growth we say. So this again is one of the very kind of an important characteristics of the living organism. And we can never forget about the movement, like the living organisms, and they have an ability to be changing their position. Like if I was here at point A, then I can move to point B. So now here the thing would click in our mind that, okay, fine, if we have an ability to be changing our position by going from the point A to point B, then how come the plants that we have, so they are also living. So you see that the plants, they actually can't change their position, but they have got some other strategy where they would be moving with respect to be showing growth toward a stimulus, and that again would be coming higher in this course in term of the gravitropism and in term of the phototropism. And then there comes this excretion. So you see, guys, that whenever there was a room, and in that room, if you people were doing some work, so you people are gonna be creating a lot of mess. Okay. So why we people are living? The reason is very simple. That in our body there happens multiple chemical reaction, and as far as those chemical reactions they are being produced in our body, so we people are living. So whenever some chemical reaction would happen, so there would be production of a lot of waste materials, and whenever you try to be removing these waste materials out of your body, so this would be excretion. And then there comes this reproduction thing, as I have already told you, that if I just continue from here where I sat, that we have formed this fetus and this is born, and he would be growing, and then at one point we human beings we're gonna die. So if during our life if we are not making the organisms of our own kind, then ultimately that species would become extinct. So this is something we don't want. So simply whenever we have the living organisms and they're gonna be making the new organism of their own kind. So this is what we refer to this as reproduction, we say. So if the living organisms, they have all of these basic features or the characteristics in them, the nutrition, the respiration, the sensitivity, the growth, and onwards the movement and excretion and the reproduction in them. So that particular thing would be living. If any of a thing does not possess any of these, so ultimately that would be not a living organism.